"Protect my son, I'll be yours," the Apache woman said. The rancher's reply shocked all. The sun had just begun its slow descent behind the distant red cliffs, painting the Arizona sky with streaks of gold and orange. John McAllister, a man of rugged features and broad shoulders, wiped the sweat from his brow as he leaned against the worn wooden fence that bordered his ranch. The wind carried with it the dry scent of dust and sagebrush, a smell he had grown accustomed to over the many years he had lived on this land. John had always been a solitary man, relying on himself for everything from tending cattle to repairing fences. Life was simple, harsh, and honest, exactly the way he preferred it. As he straightened up, scanning the horizon for his cattle, something unusual caught his eye. A figure was walking toward the ranch along the dusty trail that led through the desert. She moved with quiet purpose, her steps measured, and though her form was distant, John noticed the boy clinging to her side. The child appeared small, maybe no older than 8 or 9, and something about the way he held onto the woman suggested fear. John's hand instinctively went to the rifle resting against the fence post. He had learned over the years to be cautious. Strangers were rare in this part of the territory, and any approach carried the potential for danger. Yet, something about the woman's calm gait, even under the obvious strain, made him hesitate. There was no sign of anger or aggression in the way she walked, only determination. When she reached the gate, she stopped. Her dark hair, loosely tied back, framed a face marked by both youth and wisdom beyond her years. She spoke softly, her words carrying clearly even in the quiet desert evening. "Please," she said, her voice steady despite the urgency in her eyes. "Protect my son. I'll be yours." John froze, unsure he had heard correctly. "You what?" he asked, his voice rough from years of shouting across pastures rather than speaking softly to strangers. "I said," she repeated, a slight tremor betraying her fear, "protect my son. I will be yours." The words hung in the air like a challenge, confusing and shocking John. He had heard stories from neighboring ranchers about Apache tribes and settlers clashing, about fear and mistrust running deep on both sides. Never in his life had he imagined an Apache woman coming to his ranch and speaking like this. It was audacious, and yet there was a plea in her eyes that he could not ignore. The boy shifted nervously behind her, looking at John with wide eyes. His small hands clutched a worn leather pouch to his chest, and his face was smudged with dust and tears. It was clear he had been through something frightening, something that had left him vulnerable and in need of protection. John felt a tug at his heart he had not expected. He had never been particularly fond of children. The closest he had to a family were memories of his younger siblings and parents who had long passed. Yet, seeing the boy now, he realized that he could not simply turn them away. John took a cautious step forward, resting a hand on the gate. "Why me?" he asked. "Why—" "Come here." The woman's eyes softened, but her voice remained firm. "Because you are strong, and because this land is yours. No one will see us here unless they come searching. You can protect him. You can give him a chance to live." John's mind raced. There were so many reasons to refuse, so many dangers in helping them. Neighbors could gossip, strangers could take advantage, and yet the thought of leaving the boy vulnerable to the desert, to other threats, felt impossible. He studied the woman's face again. There was no deception there, no hidden threat, only desperation and trust. It was a gamble, but one he could not ignore. "Fine," he said finally, his voice gruff but resolute. "Come in. Just keep him close. I don't want trouble." Relief washed over her face, and for a moment the tension in her shoulders eased. She nodded once, sharply, and led her son through the gate. The boy's small footsteps barely made a sound on the packed dirt, and John found himself strangely aware of every move they made. The woman's presence filled the empty space of his ranch with an energy he had never experienced before, a mixture of caution, respect, and an unspoken plea for acceptance. Inside the modest wooden house that had served as John's home for years, he guided them to the main room. He lit a lamp, the warm glow casting long shadows across the walls and furniture. The boy sank onto a worn chair, clearly exhausted, while the woman began tending to the minor scrapes and bruises he had sustained. John watched quietly, unsure whether to speak, unsure whether this intrusion into his solitary life would change everything he had known. After a few minutes of silence, he finally asked, "What happened to him?" The woman looked up, her dark eyes reflecting both sorrow and determination. "A group of raiders attacked our village." "We were caught off guard. He ran, but not before they hit him. I could not save the others, but I can save him. That is all that matters now." The world outside his ranch was harsh, and stories like this were not uncommon, though he rarely heard them firsthand. The thought of innocent lives being destroyed, of children being left alone to fend for themselves, stirred something within him. He realized that protecting this boy was not just an act of kindness, it was a responsibility he could not refuse. Over the next few hours, John offered them food and water. He listened as the woman, whose name he learned was Aylin, spoke quietly to her son, coaxing him to eat and drink. Her voice was gentle, patient, yet carried a strength that John could not ignore. She seemed to command respect without demanding it, and the boy responded with trust he had not shown to anyone else in days. John sat quietly, observing them. The silence of the desert evening pressed in through the open windows, punctuated only by the distant calls of birds and the soft rustle of wind through the sparse trees. In that quiet, he felt the weight of the decision he had made. He had invited strangers into his home, into his life, into his carefully ordered world. And yet he did not regret it. There was a sense of purpose here, a reason beyond survival that he had not felt in years. As night fell, Aylin and her son settled into a small corner of the house that John had cleared for them. He handed them blankets and watched as they made themselves comfortable. Despite the exhaustion etched into their faces, there was a calmness about them now, a fragile peace that had been absent for days. John stepped outside, leaning on the fence and looking up at the star-filled sky. The vast expanse of the desert stretched out before him, a reminder of both isolation and possibility. He knew that the days ahead would not be easy. There would be questions, challenges, and perhaps even danger. Yet, in this moment, he felt a spark of something unfamiliar. Hope. He did not know what the future held for him, for Aylin, or for her son. But as he watched the mother and child resting inside, he realized that life on the ranch would never be the same. And, somehow, despite the uncertainty, he was ready to face it. For the first time in many years, John felt that he was not entirely alone. There was trust now, fragile but real, binding them together in an unspoken promise. He would protect the boy, and in doing so, perhaps he would discover something about himself, about compassion, and about the unexpected paths that life sometimes took. The night deepened, and the ranch settled into quiet. The wind whispered across the desert, carrying with it the sense of earth and sage, as if acknowledging the new life that had quietly entered this lonely place. John knew the dawn would bring new challenges, but for now, there was peace. And in that peace, he found a rare and valuable gift, the first glimmer of connection in a world that often seemed cold and indifferent. The morning sun rose slowly over the red cliffs, spilling light across the dusty ranch and casting long shadows that moved with the wind. John McAllister had already been awake for hours, as usual. He moved quietly around the ranch, tending to his cattle and checking the fences, all the while keeping an eye on Aylin and her son, who were still asleep in the corner of his house. Though he was a man of habit and solitude, he could not deny the curiosity and concern that had settled in his chest. When Aylin finally stirred, she stretched her tired arms and looked around the room, taking in her surroundings, the wooden beams, the simple furniture, and the smell of the ranch. It was all foreign, yet somehow safe. Her son, little Tay, rubbed his eyes and clung to her side, his small frame trembling slightly from the exhaustion of the previous days. "Good morning," John said from the doorway, his voice calm but firm. "Breakfast is almost ready. Sit. You'll need strength today." Aylin nodded, a small smile brushing her lips. "Thank you, John," she said, her tone quiet but sincere. There was something about the way she said his name, as if testing it on her tongue, unfamiliar yet respectful. They ate in silence at first, the boy nibbling cautiously at the bread and cheese John had provided. John watched them carefully, noticing how Aylin's hand would brush lightly against Tay's shoulder as she encouraged him to eat more. There was tenderness in her touch, a deep care that spoke louder than words ever could. John felt a strange warmth in his chest, a feeling he had not experienced in many years. After breakfast, John stepped outside, whistling softly to the cattle as he prepared for the day's work. Aylin and Ty followed him, curious but hesitant. They were unused to ranch life, and the wide-open space seemed both beautiful and intimidating. The boy paused several times, staring at the cattle and the dusty trails stretching across the land. Aylin held his hand firmly, guiding him along the path. "You must be careful," John said, noticing Tay's fascination with a large bull nearby. "Cattle can be dangerous if you don't respect them." "Yes, sir," Tay replied, his small voice timid but clear. Aylin gave him a reassuring squeeze, and he nodded again, as if trying to prove he understood. The day passed slowly, filled with small tasks. John showed Aylin how to repair a broken fence, how to gather firewood, and how to water the animals. Though she had never worked on a ranch before, she learned quickly, her hands sure and steady. Taya watched everything with wide eyes, sometimes helping with small chores under his mother's careful guidance. By midday, the sun was high and merciless, beating down on the dry earth. John paused under a tree, wiping the sweat from his brow. "You're stronger than I thought," he said, glancing at Aylin. "You learn fast." Aylin shrugged lightly, a faint smile on her face. "I have had to learn quickly. Life does not give many chances." Her eyes darkened for a moment, reflecting memories she did not share, and John realized there was more to her story than the raid and escape. He chose not to ask, sensing that trust was something that could not be forced. As the afternoon drew on, the distant hum of voices reached their ears. John's brow furrowed. He recognized the sound, the rough, careless voices of neighboring ranchers and travelers passing through the area. He motioned for Aylin and Tay to stay close. The boy's small hand fit tightly into hers as they moved to a shaded corner of the ranch, hidden from view. Soon a group of men arrived, their horses kicking up dust as they approached the ranch. They were curious neighbors, drawn by the sight of smoke from the chimney and the unusual activity at John's home. Whispers spread quickly about the woman and child who had appeared overnight. John stepped forward to greet them, his expression calm but guarded. "Morning," he said. "What brings you here?" One of the men, a stocky rancher named Parker, narrowed his eyes. "Heard some strange news." "An Apache woman and boy at your place? What's going on, John?" John met his gaze steadily. "They needed help. I gave it." Parker snorted, clearly unimpressed. "You're taking quite a risk. People don't forget the old stories. Strangers like that can bring trouble. This boy is innocent. He needed protection, and I decided to give it." There was a moment of tense silence. The neighbors whispered among themselves, clearly shocked by John's decision. Some shook their heads, others glanced at Aylin and Tay with suspicion. But John did not flinch. He knew that the right choice was not always the popular one. When the neighbors finally left, grumbling but without confrontation, John turned to Aylin. "They won't understand," he said softly. "Most people don't." Aylin nodded, her expression calm. "I expected that. It does not matter. What matters is that Tay is safe." The boy looked up at John, his eyes wide and trusting. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice barely audible. John felt a lump in his throat and gave him a small nod. The following days passed in a rhythm that was both new and challenging for all three of them. John taught Aylin more about ranch work, while she shared knowledge of the land and survival skills that John had never known. Tay learned quickly, running errands, carrying water, and even helping with the cattle under careful supervision. A bond began to form between the three, subtle but real, built on trust, respect, and shared effort. One evening, as the sun dipped below the cliffs, Aylin and John sat near the fire, watching Tay play quietly nearby. The boy laughed as he chased a small dog across the yard, his joy untainted by the fear he had felt days before. John felt a sense of satisfaction and relief. For the first time in many years, he allowed himself to hope that this unusual arrangement could work. "You have a good boy," John said, his voice low and sincere. "Strong, smart, and brave." Aylin smiled softly, her eyes reflecting gratitude. "He learned from me, but also from you. You've protected him, even when it was not easy." John looked at her, seeing not just the woman who had asked him for help, but someone resilient, brave, and wise. He realized that his initial mistrust had given way to respect and even admiration. Life had a way of testing people, and in Aylin, he saw a strength that matched his own. But the peace was fragile. Word traveled slowly but inevitably, and soon whispers reached the distant settlers about the unusual household at John's ranch. Some were curious, others suspicious. John sensed that their presence would be questioned, their motives doubted, and perhaps even challenged. He knew that he would have to face judgment, not just from neighbors, but from strangers who did not understand the bond forming here. One afternoon, as John and Aylin worked side by side mending a fence, a shadow fell across the yard. He looked up to see a stranger approaching on horseback. The man was rough-looking, with a sunburned face and sharp eyes. He stopped a few yards away, eyeing the trio carefully. "John McAllister?" the man called. "Yes," John replied cautiously. "Who wants to know?" "Heard about the Apache woman at your ranch," he said. "People are talking. Some say it's a mistake, some say it's dangerous. I make my own decisions. She and her son are safe here, and that is what matters." The man studied him for a long moment, then shrugged. Don't say I didn't warn you. People don't like change, especially when it comes to the old ways. With that, the stranger mounted his horse and rode off, leaving John with a sense of unease. He knew the days ahead would bring questions, judgments, and perhaps even threats, but he also knew that turning back was impossible. He had made a promise to protect Tay, and he would keep it no matter what. That night, as the desert wind whispered through the cliffs and across the ranch, John sat outside, watching the stars. Aylin and Ty slept inside, their breathing steady and calm. He thought about the unusual arrangement, about the trust they had placed in him, and about the life that was slowly forming here. It would not be easy, and challenges were sure to come, but he felt ready. Life had a way of surprising people, John realized. He had spent years alone, focused only on survival and routine. Now, he had something more, a responsibility, a connection, and perhaps even a purpose he had not known he was missing. Protecting Tay and helping Aylin was no longer just an obligation. It was a choice he was proud to make. The night deepened, and the desert settled into quiet once again. John knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new questions, and perhaps even danger, but he also knew that together they could face it, and in that knowledge he found a rare sense of peace. The desert sun had barely climbed over the horizon when John McAllister noticed the first signs of trouble. The wind carried an unfamiliar sound, the distant clatter of hooves across the dry earth. His hand instinctively went to the rifle resting near the fence post. Something was coming, and it was coming fast. He could see a small cloud of dust rising on the horizon, moving steadily toward the ranch. Aylin, already awake and tending to Tay, noticed the change in his posture. "John," she said softly but urgently, "what is it?" "They're coming," he replied, his voice low. "I'm not sure who yet, but they're moving fast." His small body shook with fear, and Aylin knelt beside him, placing her hands on his shoulders. "Stay calm, Taye," she said gently. "We will be safe. Trust John. He will protect us." John scanned the horizon carefully. 5 riders emerged from the distance, rough-looking men with hard faces and weapons glinting in the sunlight. They rode recklessly, shouting commands to each other. John's heart pounded. These were not friendly visitors. He could see it in their eyes. The aggression, the intention. "Get inside," John ordered. "Quickly, bar the doors and stay out of sight." Aylin nodded, gathering Taye in her arms and guiding him into the house. The boy's small feet barely made a sound on the wooden floor, but his heart was racing. He clung to his mother, trusting her completely. John moved quickly, checking the doors and windows, making sure everything was secure. He knew he had to act fast. The men outside would not hesitate to cause harm if they found any weakness. The riders approached the ranch, shouting demands. "Open up!" "We know someone is hiding there," one of them yelled. "Come out or we burn it down." John stepped outside, his rifle in hand, and raised his voice to answer. "This is my land. Leave now or face the consequences." The leader of the group sneered, a cruel twist to his lips. "You've been helping outsiders," he said. "We don't like that. Step aside, McAllister, or you'll regret it." He knew they were after Aylin and Tay, or perhaps just looking for trouble. He could not allow them to harm the boy or his mother. "I won't let you touch them," he said firmly. "Leave this place now." Dust swirled around their feet as the riders urged their horses forward. John braced himself, aiming carefully. He was ready to defend the ranch no matter the cost. Inside the house, Aylin whispered to Tay, trying to calm him. "Remember what I taught you," she said softly. "Stay low, stay quiet, and trust John. He is strong and brave. We will be safe." The boy nodded, though fear still shone in his eyes. He crouched behind a table, peeking through a small crack in the wall. He could see John standing his ground, rifle ready, facing the approaching danger. For the first time in days, Tay felt a spark of hope amidst the fear. The men outside were now close enough that John could hear their boots pounding against the dirt and their horses' hooves stamping impatiently. They were confident, thinking that a lone rancher would be easy to intimidate. But John had faced hardships before, and he knew that courage and preparation often outweighed sheer numbers. As the riders drew nearer, John fired a warning shot into the air. The sound cracked sharply, echoing across the cliffs. The men faltered, startled, but the leader barked orders to continue. John took a deep breath, steadying himself. He could not allow them to reach the house. Suddenly, Aylin moved. Without hesitation, she stepped outside, standing beside John with a determined expression. "They will not harm him," she said firmly, her voice carrying across the yard. "Not while we stand together." John glanced at her, surprised by her bravery. Her presence gave him strength, and he realized that she was not just a survivor, she was a warrior in her own right. Together, they presented a united front, ready to defend the boy and the ranch. The attackers hesitated, unsure of the unexpected resistance. John and Aylin's confidence and determination were undeniable. The leader shouted threats, but the resolve in their eyes made him pause. He had not expected the woman to stand alongside the rancher, and it made him reconsider the difficulty of this confrontation. One of the men dismounted, attempting to approach the house from the side. John fired another warning shot, forcing him to retreat. Aylin grabbed a heavy stick nearby, ready to defend herself if necessary. The boy watched from the window, his heart racing, but he felt safe knowing his mother and John were there. Time seemed to stretch as the standoff continued. Dust rose around them and the sun beat down mercilessly, but neither John nor Aylin wavered. Their courage was clear, their determination unshakable. The attackers began to realize that this would not be an easy victory. Finally, the leader waved his hand, signaling a retreat. "This isn't over, McAllister," he shouted, spitting on the ground. "You'll regret this." The men mounted their horses and rode off, leaving a cloud of dust behind them. John lowered his rifle, his muscles tense from the confrontation. Aylin exhaled deeply, relief washing over her face. She went inside and embraced Tay, holding him close. John approached them, placing a reassuring hand on Aylin's shoulder. "They're gone," he said. "For now, at least. You two are safe." Tay looked up at him with wide eyes. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice trembling. John knelt beside him, giving the boy a firm but gentle nod. "It's my duty," he said simply. "No one will harm you while I'm here." The bond between the three of them deepened that day. The danger had revealed not only John's courage, but also Aylin's strength and resilience. They had faced fear together and emerged victorious, their trust in each other solidified. Over the next few days, John made additional preparations. He reinforced the fences, secured the windows, and planned for any future threats. Aylin continued to help with the ranch work, her skills and knowledge of the land proving invaluable. Tye grew stronger and more confident with each passing day, his laughter once again filling the ranches. Neighbors began to notice the change as well. Some approached cautiously, curious about the unusual household. John welcomed them politely, showing them that Aylin and Tay were no threat. And slowly, perceptions began to shift. People began to respect the courage and strength of the trio, recognizing that kindness and bravery could exist even in difficult circumstances. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and pink, John, Aylin, and Tay sat together outside the house. The boy played nearby, tossing small stones into the dirt and laughing. Aylin watched him fondly, her eyes softening with love and pride. John observed them both, feeling a warmth he had not experienced in years. "You've taught him well," John said quietly to Aylin. "And you've protected him well," she replied. "Together, we've kept him safe." They shared a moment of silent understanding, knowing that the bond they had formed was more than just necessity. It was trust, respect, and a shared commitment to protect the boy and each other. The night deepened, and stars began to twinkle across the vast desert sky. The wind whispered softly, carrying with it the promise of safety and the quiet peace that had returned to the ranch. John knew that challenges would come again, that the world outside would not always be kind, but he also knew that together they could face anything. For the first time in many years, John allowed himself to feel hope. Hope that the boy would grow up safe and strong, hope that Aylin would find peace and security, and hope that this unlikely family could thrive despite the dangers that surrounded them. The bond they had forged in the face of fear and uncertainty was unbreakable, and it would carry them through the trials that lay ahead. Together they had faced danger, and together they would face whatever came next. The night was calm, and for the first time in a long while the ranch felt alive, not just with the sounds of animals and wind, but with the presence of a family bound by courage, trust, and love. And in that quiet, John knew that no matter what challenges awaited them, they would meet them together, stronger than ever. The desert air was crisp that morning, carrying the faint scent of sage and dust. John McAllister stood at the edge of his ranch, looking out over the wide expanse of land that had been his life for many years. Yet in the last few weeks, life had changed in ways he had never imagined. The ranch was no longer just a place of work and solitude. It had become a home filled with courage, trust, and unexpected bonds. Aylin and Tay were already awake, moving about the house quietly. The boy had become stronger and more confident, running to help wherever he could. Aylin, graceful and calm, worked alongside John, her hands skilled from years of experience in the wild. Together the three had formed a rhythm, a family shaped by trust and the shared trials they had faced. As John prepared breakfast, he thought about the challenges ahead. Word of their unusual household had spread further than he had anticipated. Neighbors whispered, some curious, some skeptical. John knew that acceptance would not come easily, but he also knew that their bond had proven itself against fear, danger, and doubt. They were stronger together, and he would not let anyone threaten that. By mid-morning, a small group of settlers approached the ranch. They were cautious, keeping their distance as they watched John and the others. One of them, a man named Harris, stepped forward. "John McAllister," he said, his voice firm but not unfriendly. "We've heard about what happened here. That Apache woman and boy, I must admit, I had my doubts. But it seems you've protected them well." John nodded, his expression calm. "They are under my care. That is all that matters." Harris studied him for a long moment, then smiled slightly. "I see. It takes courage to stand for what is right, even when others question you. You've earned respect, John." The other settlers murmured in agreement. Some still looked unsure, but the tension in the air had eased. Slowly, acceptance began to grow. People were starting to see that kindness and bravery could exist together, even in the harsh desert. Later that afternoon, John, Island, and Ty worked together to repair a section of fence that had been damaged in a recent storm. As they worked, a messenger arrived from a neighboring ranch, riding quickly across the dusty trail. He carried a letter addressed to John. John opened it carefully, scanning the words. The letter was from a local authority, acknowledging the bravery he and Aylin had shown during the recent threat from the riders. It praised their courage, their quick thinking, and the protection they had given to Tay. The letter concluded with a note of encouragement, urging others to follow their example of unity and strength. John looked up from the letter, a rare smile crossing his face. "Seems the world is beginning to notice," he said quietly. Aylin glanced at him, her eyes shining with pride and gratitude. "That is good," she replied softly. "But what matters most is not what others think. What matters is that Tay is safe and that we are together." The boy looked up from gathering water for the cattle, his small face glowing with excitement.
"I helped too," he shouted proudly, holding up the bucket. John chuckled and ruffled his hair.
"I know, Tay, and you did very well." As evening approached, a gentle calm settled over the ranch. The animals were fed, the fences repaired, and the sun dipped below the cliffs, painting the sky in brilliant shades of gold and crimson. John, Island, and Tay sat outside, enjoying a quiet moment together. The boy played nearby, laughing as he chased a small dog across the yard. Aylin watched him fondly, her heart full of love and relief. John observed both of them, feeling a warmth he had never thought possible. For a long while they sat in silence, listening to the soft whispers of the desert wind. The trials of the past weeks, the fear, the danger, and the uncertainty seemed distant now, replaced by a deep sense of peace. John realized that life had given him something he had not expected, a family, a purpose, and a connection that could not be broken. That night, a few neighbors came to the ranch, invited by John himself. They gathered around the fire, sharing stories and food, their initial suspicion giving way to curiosity and respect. Island sat quietly beside John, Tay on her lap, and John felt a sense of pride and contentment. This was more than he had hoped for. A community beginning to see what he already knew, that courage, trust, and compassion could change hearts. As the fire crackled and the stars sparkled above, John spoke softly to Aylin. "You've been incredible," he said. "Your strength, your courage, you've shown me a lot." Island looked at him, her eyes calm and steady. "And you have shown me kindness and protection I never thought I would find. Together, we have made something good here." The boy, sensing the seriousness of their conversation, looked up at both of them. "Will we always be safe?" he asked, his small voice filled with hope. John smiled gently, kneeling beside him. "As long as we are together, nothing can harm us. We will protect each other, no matter what." Days turned into weeks, and the ranch grew stronger. The bond between John, Island, and Ty deepened with each passing day. They shared work, laughter, and quiet moments of reflection. The community began to accept them fully, recognizing that what had once seemed strange was now a source of inspiration. People visited the ranch to learn from them, to see how trust, courage, and kindness could overcome fear and prejudice. One afternoon, as John and Aylin tended to the cattle, a sudden storm rolled in from the distant mountains. Dark clouds gathered and the wind picked up, whipping the desert dust into the air. John quickly ushered Tay and the animals into shelter, while Aylin helped secure the fences. Together they worked efficiently, their movements synchronized, their trust in each other absolute. The storm raged through the night, but when morning came, the ranch had survived unscathed. The sky cleared, and the first rays of sun reflected off the wet earth. John looked around, his heart swelling with gratitude. They had faced danger, they had faced fear, and they had come through stronger and more united than ever. That evening, as the sun set once more, John made a decision. He approached Aylin, his voice quiet but firm. "You came to me asking protection, and I gave it. But now, I want to give something more. I want you to stay not because of a promise, but because we have built this life together. Will you stay with me?" Aylin's eyes softened, a smile forming on her lips. She looked at John, then at Tay, and finally back at him. "I will stay," she said, her voice full of certainty. "Not for promises, but for what we have built, for what we are together." Taye, sensing the importance of the moment, ran to John and Aylin, hugging them both tightly. "We're a family," he exclaimed, his laughter ringing through the desert air. John laughed too, a sound of pure relief and happiness. He lifted the boy into his arms, holding him close. "Yes, Tay," he said, "we are a family, and we will protect each other, always." As night fell, the ranch was quiet but alive with the warmth of home. The fire crackled, the stars shone brightly, and the desert stretched endlessly around them, vast and beautiful. John, Aylin, and Ty sat together, a family forged by courage, trust, and love. The trials they had faced had brought them closer, and the bond they shared was unbreakable. In the days that followed, life on the ranch continued peacefully. Neighbors came to visit, some to offer friendship, others to seek guidance. John and Aylin worked side by side, teaching Tay not only the skills he needed to survive, but also the values of courage, kindness, and resilience. The boy grew strong and confident, a living testament to the love and protection he had received. Through every challenge, every storm, and every moment of uncertainty, John, Aylin, and Tay stood together. They had faced danger, prejudice, and fear, and had emerged stronger for it. Their story became known throughout the region, inspiring others to act with courage, compassion, and unity. Years later, as John looked across the ranch, now thriving and full of life, he knew that the decision he had made that fateful morning, when Aylin had asked him to protect her son, had changed everything. He had gained not only a family, but also a deeper understanding of trust, love, and the strength that comes from standing together. The desert wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the scent of sage and the promise of new days. John, Aylin, and Tay stood together, watching the sun set over the cliffs, knowing that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them as one. The ranch was more than land, more than work. It was home. And together they had built something lasting, something strong, and something beautiful. In that quiet moment, under the vast star-filled sky, John realized that life, with all its dangers and uncertainties, could also be filled with hope, love, and the strength of family. And for him, Aylin, and Tay, that was enough.